The dreaded Buffies update came out a few days ago, and although many of the problems with the update were clear from the time they announced it in late November, which I already covered previously, many of the issues with the update were only discovered after everybody got a chance to play it, myself included. Thankfully, the vast majority of people have been very vocal of their dislike of the update on social media, but I still think it's important to cover some of the less obvious issues that set a dark precedent for Brawl Stars moving forward. For starters, I want to discuss the fact that all 6 brawlers that got Buffies this update got fundamental reworks, ranging from slightly altering how you use your gadget to turning Mortis into a completely different brawler in one single update after 7 years of him being in the game. Now, they announced last month in the initial Buffies newsletter that they were using this opportunity to revisit old brawler kits and rework them if they don't make sense, and this was one of the very few things in the announcement that I actually fully supported. However, instead of reworking brawlers that could actually use adjustments, a lot of the changes made to all 6 brawlers that received Buffies this update felt extremely unnecessary and unwarranted, and in some cases make less sense than before, despite them wanting to go back and fix the brawler kits for that expressed purpose. Every player is different, but anyone that has ever played Brawl Stars has one thing in common, and that's the fact we've all played Shelly. Being the very first brawler you unlock, she's a very simple, if not the simplest mechanics in Brawl Stars. The reason you unlock Shelly first and not someone like Colt is that she is incredibly easy to understand how she works and she's relatively easy to play, making for a great introduction to the game in my opinion. But after the update, I think that experience might worsen for newer players. I'm actually not referring to Buffies with this, but trust me, we'll get there, but rather the aimable gadget rework for both of her gadgets. Now, her first gadget is mostly unchanged from before the update, aside from the fact that you can aim it in any direction now, and for it being a dash, that makes sense. I can fully support and understand why they would want to use the joystick functionality for this. However, the second gadget, Clay Pigeons, is significantly less intuitive and seemingly got reworked so they could give her a joystick. Previously, Clay Pigeons tightened your spread and increased the range of your main attack for like 5 seconds, which when combined with her Shell Stock star power, allowed you to burst someone down that you slowed down with your super at a distance. And honestly, that was the only thing making Shelly playable in a competitive setting. However, now, the gadget operates much different. Instead of tapping a button and simply being able to shoot further, the gadget functions independently from her main attack. When you aim the gadget, you see the classic little Clay Pigeons bullet spread that we're all familiar with. How fun! But now the gadget has 3 charges, and each charge consumes ammo and fires a Clay Pigeon shot, and after unloading all 3, it goes on cooldown. My primary question is why? Genuinely, who thought that Clay Pigeons was not only deserving of an aimable gadget, but a complete rework to how it works? My primary issue isn't even that the rework is uncalled for, but that a brand new player is going to buy this for their first ever gadget and be confused out of their mind, because of how little sense it makes. Not just in the functional way, but with how little sense it makes with her abilities. It doesn't fit in at all. I see no issue with the way that Shelly's gadget was before, but was something inherently wrong with the fact that you could just click the button and shoot further with the little halo above your head, the little gadget indicator? I really, don't think so, you know? If you saw the little icon above her head, you know she was shooting further and that she'd probably, stay away. But now you can just do that whenever you want. And I don't think that's very, fair. However, I actually think Shelly got off relatively easy compared to some other brawlers in this update. Something I think is extremely important to mention before we move forward is how in the newsletter with the announcement of aimable gadgets, they state, "We are also making gadgets an aimable joystick if it makes sense for the gadget in question." The reason this is so important to bring up is because both gadgets, for all 6 brawlers that received their Buffies this update, got their gadgets turned into an aimable version, or reworked to be aimable in some way. Now, before addressing the bat in the room, I would like to briefly discuss 2 of Colt and Frank's gadgets for 2 different reasons. Starting with Colt, his silver bullet gadget is still fundamentally identical to what it was before. It's a piercing bullet that breaks walls. The reason I bring this up is because now it's a joystick, which literally makes no sense to me personally. Now truthfully, this is definitely more of an opinion, but if it still consumes ammo, and it still does the same thing, what's the point of making it an aimable joystick? Seriously. The only thing that this change does is make it impossible to see when Colt is aiming his gadget, and you can get caught off guard a lot easier. Now, in contrast, we have Frank, whose active noise cancelling gadget now just fires a projectile that does damage, without his Buffy. That's literally all it does. It's just a random projectile that you can do some damage with. It's such like a random and out of place thing in Frank's kit. Why does a melee brawler that does everything with his hammer have some random projectile with headphones? Quick little side note. What did they do to his music? It sounds so bad. Where'd the music go? In a similar vein, his pull gadget is now extremely weird and extremely broken, but I'll go into more detail on the balance side of this update in a bit. Something I've yet to mention yet is that they are removing epic and mythic gears from every brawler receiving Buffies in the future, and in this update, that includes Spike, Colt, and Mortis. Colt got his reload gear fully integrated into his base kit, and Spike got a slightly less powerful version of his mythic gear into his base kit. But Mortis, on the other hand, did not get his mythic gear integrated into his kit at all, and he has received no compensation. This sucks for Mortis in particular, because his mythic gear was crucial to his playstyle, and you basically couldn't play him without it, whereas it's completely fine to play Colt and Spike without special gears. However, this isn't even what I'm talking about when I say they butchered Mortis. Before the update, Mortis only had one truly viable build: his survival shovel gadget, which increased reload speed, coiled snake, and mythic plus damage gears. You could occasionally swap out the second gear for like shield or whatever, but 99% of people in top play were using this exact same Mortis setup in every situation. If you were on the balancing team and you saw that 99% of pro players were using this exact same build in every single situation, you would probably buff his other gadget and star power to provide some competition, right? Well, in this case, for seemingly no reason, they decided to completely remove and rework his second gadget. I truthfully cannot think of one good reason that would warrant reworking a brawler as iconic and as popular as Mortis to this extent. Even if you want to make the argument that it was broken, it was super iconic and necessary to his playstyle. It's like if they took away Lily's Vanish gadget or El Primo's Throw. And this leads back to what I was discussing before. All 12 gadgets for the 6 brawlers that got Buffies this update got their gadgets reworked to be aimable, even if they didn't warrant being aimed at all, like what they said in the original newsletter. I truly hope this was a one-time thing, a freak accident of a decision, and they only really give aimable gadgets to brawlers that deserve them in the future. Because some brawlers just truly do not need aimable gadgets. A brawler like Surge has 2 gadgets that are completely balanced, and they both work perfectly fine as is. Giving his gadgets a joystick will only worsen the experience in that case, in my opinion. The current system of being able to use a gadget and have a little icon above your brawler is so much more clear and easier to spot, in my opinion. Whereas what we are seeing with the gadgets this update, it's so easy to just randomly get caught out by a Frank pulling you from 8 tiles away because there's no distinction between his normal attack and his gadget. And I'll include this here because I don't know where else to put it, but the in-game brawler UI is kind of ass. And my tweet about it got like 3,000 likes, which is crazy for me, so it's clear that people agree that something should change because it's super hard to see any actual useful information. I spent a long time on the last segment, so I'll like to briefly cover the balance of these Buffies. Currently, the ranking of Buffies looks something like this from what I've seen on Twitter and my personal experience with the update so far. But what we need to remember about this is that almost every single brawler here was D tier or lower before resaving their Buffies, with the exception of Frank and Mortis who are around C tier. This sets a pretty scary precedent going forward because once more powerful brawlers get their hands on Buffies, the meta will just hinge on the brawlers with amazing Buffies and the brawlers who counter those brawlers, if it doesn't already enough. I want to draw a parallel to hypercharges here, as many of the same brawlers who were in the first batch of hypercharges will likely be in the first few batches of Buffies as well. In the first batch, half of your hypercharges just made your super bigger, and the other brawlers had effects ranging from boring to you're only using this for the stat buff. There were outliers, but the first batch of hypers were rather tame compared to what came right after. Batch 2 had significantly more overpowered hypers that completely altered the playstyle of the brawler in question, making them reliant on it. I'm referring to Lou and Colette primarily here, but Maisie and Jessie's hypers were both pretty good a couple months later when they both got buffs. Batch 3 rolled out hypers for 5 assassins at the same time, notably Edgar and Fang, who both required emergency nerfs following the release of their hypercharges after being in the D and F tiers for years at that point. By wave 4, things started to tone down after hypercharges were changed to no longer have their duration extended by dealing damage, and were now a flat 5 seconds no matter what. It took over 6 months for hypercharges to be in a somewhat balanced state where they could release with less friction. Obviously there were still some, outliers, but For the most part, that's when they started to stabilize. If we look at Buffies, the first 6 that were already released are immensely broken compared to the first 6 hypercharged counterparts, and if hypercharges were any omen, it could take till at least summer 2026 for something to happen. But what exactly should happen? The most popular change, and the one I suggested in my original Buffies video, was to simply only allow you to be able to equip 2 or 1 at a time. This would allow for more actual strategy to the game instead of just automatically getting stronger once you get lucky from a claw machine. This change would also benefit free-to-play players because they wouldn't need to spend an egregious number of resources to get their brawler to full power. With how much I've seen and suggested, I really do believe this is the route they would go in terms of balancing Buffies. Mostly because I don't really see where else they could nerf them. Having 18 Buffies per update is a lot of small things to keep track of for the balancing team, considering they do shit like leave Mina and Meeple as the best brawlers in the game for 3 updates in a row already. Simply balancing them in the traditional sense seems off the table. While some brawlers certainly require immediate nerfs, i.e. literally all 3 of Spike and Ems' Buffies, they could easily avoid a lot more of that problem in the future if you just couldn't have all 3 broken Buffies and could only carry 2. It would lessen the impact a lot more than I think a lot of people realize. I won't spend too long on this section because I covered it in very large detail in my last video, but I would like to address the buffs to progression this update. I'll start with Chaos Drops because it's the one the creators hyped up the most. I find it so funny that all the people with the dev build opened 8 Chaos Drops and were amazed at the rewards, and were acting like it was a massive bump for progression, because, let's be honest, you are never getting that shit. I'll put the odds up on screen if you haven't seen them already, but the primary takeaway is that Chaos Drops are almost identical to Star Drops, but instead of starting at Rare and ending at Legendary, they start at Super Rare and end at Ultra. Now, in terms of splitting, there's a 20% chance for it to split once. One time. 1 extra Super Rare Star Drop is a 20% chance. To put this into perspective, that's almost the same odds as getting a Hyper from a Legendary Star Drop. And that's just the first split. 4 times split is 8%, and the holy grail of the 8 splits is 2%. The same odds of actually getting to the Ultra Drop itself. Meaning, to get 8 times Ultra Chaos Drops, you need to hit a 2% chance on top of another 2% chance. In percentages, that's a whopping 0.04, or a 1 in 2,500 chance. There's gonna be 6 Chaos Drops per month in the Brawl Pass, which is 72 across an entire year. Meaning, for one single 8 split Ultra Chaos Drop, you would need to play for over a third of a century, or nearly 35 years, if you're lucky. Now, they said there would be some in daily rewards, and the bonus rewards in the Brawl Pass and in events. We're getting 5 for Brawler Days very soon if it didn't happen already by the time this video is out, but these odds are still absolutely fucking comically bad. In terms of other progression updates, the Brawl Pass is barely being improved and might actually be getting nerfed in terms of the gem value, after the PowerPoint change I talked about in my last video. There's going to be 2 more Mega Quests per season, and they'll have decreased requirements now, which is nice. I personally have no complaints, as long as they keep the rewards from the Mega Quest the same, instead of splitting up the current rewards into even more quests. Surely they would never do that, right? Honestly, I have a lot more I could say, but the script is getting very long. This update needed a couple more months in the oven, but they almost definitely wanted to push it out in time for the holiday season, so I can at least understand some of the bad decisions were very rushed. One final thing I would like to address is all the people saying, at least it isn't Power 12. To those people, do you think gambling with 2,000 power points and 1,000 coins up to 18 times to max one brawler that you want is better than Power 12 or not? This situation reminded me a lot of the Clash Royale level 15 update, and how they kept saying no gold, and instead of costing gold, costed 50,000 elite wildcards per level 15 upgrade, which was about 10 times more than a level 14 upgrade. So they just shifted the requirements from requiring both currencies to requiring 10 times more of one currency, which is kind of what we're seeing with the whole PowerPoints thing right now, but in reverse. I really hope they do take some of the criticism in this video and all over social media, including stuff I didn't even include in here, like the new Brawler HUD being super confusing, the insane gem price of purchasing a Buffy that you want, when compared to hypercharges you could get one for 7x value for 79 gems. That's not even like half of a hyper Buffy, what the fuck? The horrendous balancing, or lack thereof, for Ems and Spike. The fact they mentioned you can't get duplicates in Brawl Talk, which is most certainly a jab at Clash Royale's latest hero box system, despite the claw machine having 6 times the amount of total drops. compared to Clash Royale's Hero Box. I really could go on. Now, I really do feel optimistic for the future of Brawl Stars, despite all that I've said in this video, and I really do think that if the dev team cares about the game, which I really sure do hope they do, they will do their best to fix it. And finally, to address anyone that thinks I'm hating for the sake of hating Supercell, I go live every day, and my streamers do better the more popular the game is. I actively want Brawl Stars to be the best it possibly can be, and that's why I made this video. Anyway, if you liked the video, there's a button for that. Let me know how you guys feel about the future of Buffies, and I'll see you later.